Hi, everybody. Thank you for joining us. My name is Howard O, and I'm an Associate Director of the White House Office of Public Engagement, also known as White House OPE. As part of White House OPE's outreach, and as a special addition for a normal cadence of biweekly stakeholder calls, we are excited to co-host today's event commemorating the 50th anniversary of Title IX's passage, honoring the legacy of Title IX co-author, Representative Patsy Mink, the first woman of color and first Asian American woman to serve in the U.S. House of Representatives. During her 12 terms as a member of Congress, Representative Mink demonstrated her commitment to giving voice to the communities she held dear to her heart, including ANHPIs, women, immigrants, and the underserved. Today, President Biden issued a statement on the 50th anniversary of Title IX, which we'll hear more about later in the program. But also, this past weekend was the 40th anniversary of the murder of Vincent Chin. 40 years ago, the ANHPI community was shaken to its core by the heinous, racially motivated murder of Vincent Chin, in which the assailants were acquitted without serving any time. This injustice sparked the modern Asian American civil rights movement, and messages by President Biden and Vice President Harris were presented and delivered by Erica Mortzugu, Deputy Assistant to the President and ANHPI Senior Liaison, to community members honoring Vincent Chin's life and legacy in Detroit, Michigan, for 4-day remembrance and rededication honoring Vincent Chin. So in the words of the President, together, we will honor Vincent Chin's legacy by working to ensure that America's foundational promises of freedom, equality, and opportunity are within reach for everyone, no matter who we are, what we look like, or where we come from. And in the words of the Vice President on the somber anniversary, let us commit to continuing the fight for justice, equality, and opportunity for all. And with that, it is my honor to introduce my colleague, Rebecca Lee, Deputy Director for the White House Initiative on Asian Americans, Native Hawaiians, and Founders, who will serve as our event's MC. Rebecca?
Thank you so much, Howard. On behalf of the White House Initiative on Asian Americans, Native Hawaiians, and Pacific Islanders, or what we call WHIAANHPI, welcome. It's always an honor to partner with Howard in the White House Office of Public Engagement. Today, we not only commemorate the 50th anniversary of Title IX, but we're also rededicating ourselves to furthering equity, justice, and opportunity for all. WHIAANHPI is excited to help carry on the legacy of the late Congresswoman Patsy Mink, a trailblazing legislator whose legacy of public service reflects her relentless commitment to the rights of women, immigrants, and opportunity for all by celebrating with you all. Her work in championing Title IX put government on the side of educational equity for girls and women with its ban on sex discrimination by educational institutions receiving federal funds. The 5 decades since its passage brought revolutionary changes to gender equity and women's opportunities, such as the rise of girls and women in athletics, the movement of women into professions like law and medicine, and the increasing numbers of women speaking out against sexual harassment. I am honored to represent AA and NHPI women leaders in the Biden-Harris administration, alongside so many great leaders like Ambassador Catherine Tai, Erica Mortzugu, and Crystal Kai. It is an honor now to introduce Ambassador Tai, the U.S. Trade Representative, and our co-chair of the White House Initiative and President's Advisory Commission on AA and NHPIs. Ambassador Tai is a member of the President's Cabinet. And as a U.S. Trade Representative, Ambassador Tai is a principal trade advisor, negotiator, and spokesperson on U.S. trade policy. Ambassador Tai spent most of her career in public service, focusing on international economic diplomacy, monitoring, and enforcement. She previously served as Chief Trade Counsel and Trade Subcommittee Staff Director for the House Ways and Means Committee in the U.S. Congress, and is an experienced World Trade Organization litigator. Ambassador Tai, the floor is yours.
Well, hello, everyone. First, I'd like to thank Rebecca, Howard, and the WHIAANHPI and OPE staff for putting together this event. I'd also like to recognize all of you for your work throughout the month of May to organize and lead many events in honor of AA and NHPI Heritage Month. Of course, we all know that WHIAANHPI's work is ongoing, and WHIAANHPI's activism does not end when May turns to June. And that is especially true as we come together today to celebrate the 50th anniversary of Title IX being signed into law. The impact of Title IX cannot be overstated. Originally intended to prevent discrimination, the law has also promoted gender equity in our education system from high school to collegiate athletics and beyond. In 1971, the year before Title IX took effect, women received 43% of bachelor's degrees. Less than 300,000 girls participated in high school sports. Just 1 year after Title IX was signed into law, participation in girls' sports increased by nearly 180%. By the end of Title IX's first decade, the gap between men and women receiving bachelor's degrees had closed. This afternoon, you will hear more about how Title IX has increased opportunities for women and girls and inspired generations to fulfill their highest educational aspirations. But first, I want to take a moment to honor a woman whose perseverance and determination made this legislation possible. It is because of her contributions that in 2002, Congress renamed the law the Patsy Takemoto Mink Equal Opportunity in Education Act. Last month, during our AA and NHPI Heritage Month events, I often found myself thinking about Vincent Chin, whom we lost 40 years ago, the late, great Secretary Norm Mineta, who co-founded CAPAC and led WHIAANHPI's predecessor organization, and Congresswoman Patsy Mink, a legendary and visionary public servant. This year marks the 20th anniversary since her passing, but her legacy, which we celebrate today in concert with the 50th anniversary of Title IX, remains alive and well. We often remember Congresswoman Mink as the first woman of color and the first Asian American woman elected to Congress. Once elected, she used her influence to push for a transformational law that continues to have an impact today. As the first woman of color and first Asian American confirmed to serve as United States Trade Representative, I often think about how it isn't enough to just be the first. Like Congresswoman Mink, I believe in helping the next generation of leaders and making their path to public service just that little bit easier. In the face of constant efforts to roll back hard-fought progress, Congresswoman Mink remained a committed crusader for justice. Her steadfast support of Title IX in the face of sustained opposition after its adoption pushed our country closer to realizing the dream of a more perfect union, regardless of gender, race, region, or ethnicity. Today, we celebrate her fight for equity and equality, and in the face of ongoing persistent attacks to dismantle and weaken Title IX. President Biden and all of us in this administration are committed to building on Title IX. The administration's first national strategy on gender equity and equality builds on the legacy of Congresswoman Mink by launching a whole of government effort to dismantle systemic barriers and address gender discrimination in a comprehensive way. As we celebrate Congresswoman Mink's fight for equity and equality, we must recommit ourselves to her life's work. And it is my pleasure to introduce a leader who would make Patsy Mink proud, our good friend and ally, Erica Mortsugu. Thank you.
Madam Ambassador, thank you so much. Aloha, y'all. I'm so honored to join so many incredible Asian American, Native Hawaiian, and Pacific Islander women leaders today to recognize the accomplishments that the late Chairwoman Patsy Mink achieved to advance gender equity in our country. 50 years ago, the passage of Title IX of the Education Amendments Act of 1972 was a landmark law that barred sex discrimination in institutions receiving federal funds and opened opportunities for women in athletics. The law represents a pivotal moment in the modern women's rights and social justice movements, from reproductive health care to financial independence to employment security. In addition, Chairwoman Mink's trailblazing efforts shepherded the rise of girls and women's athletics, the movement of women into professions like law and medicine, and the increasing numbers of women speaking out against sexual harassment. As Speaker Pelosi said of her this morning at the unveiling of the chairwoman's portrait in the Capitol, quote, "She was a leader, a collaborator, and a cooperator." And as Billie Jean King said, quote, "Let us salute, celebrate, and cherish her leadership." As someone who grew up in Hawaii with the chairwoman as my role model, and it was also, by the way, her run for city council that was the first campaign that I ever volunteered on when I was 10 years old. This is a proud day to honor her leadership and legacy and to inspire the work we have ahead of us. With that, I'd like to share with you the President's statement commemorating the 50th anniversary of Title IX. And here I'll quote. 50 years ago, Congresswoman Patsy Takemoto Mink, the first woman of color elected to Congress, led the effort to write and pass Title IX, which President Nixon signed into law. Title IX stated that no one should be excluded from participation or face discrimination on the basis of sex in any education programs or activity receiving federal assistance. It consisted of just 37 words of legislative language, but it transformed our nation. Over the past 50 years, our nation has made monumental progress in advancing equity and equality for all students, including by narrowing gender gaps in sports, expanding opportunities in science and technology fields, and protecting students from sex discrimination, including sex-based harassment and sexual violence. This is what America is all about: possibilities. Millions of women and girls have benefited from the change that Title IX helped to make possible. More women and girls are participating and excelling in countless fields, from professional sports to science, math, and technology, than ever before. Their leadership, achievements, and success bear out the legacy of countless women throughout history who fought hard for a place at the table and for equal opportunity in all fields. Yet there is more work to do. As we look to the next 50 years, I am committed to protecting this progress and working to achieve full equality, inclusion, and dignity for women and girls, LGBTQI+ Americans, all students, and all Americans. My administration will continue to fight tirelessly to realize the promise of Title IX, that every person deserves an opportunity to pursue their education free from discrimination and realize their full potential. On behalf of President Biden and Vice President Harris, we thank you all for celebrating the late Patsy Mink's incredible contributions to gender equity in Title IX, and we look forward to continuing the good work together with each of you. Mahalo for sharing this space today. Rebecca, I will pass it back over to you with thanks.
Thank you so much, Erica, and thank you for your trailblazing leadership from the White House. Next, I want to introduce another fearless leader who also hails from Congresswoman Patsy Mink's home state of Hawaii, Crystal Kai, who serves as Executive Director of both the White House Initiative and the President's Advisory Commission on WHIAANHPIs. Crystal, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Rebecca, and also thank you to Erica, Ambassador Ty, and Howard for putting together this incredible program, and aloha everyone. As our previous speakers have so eloquently mentioned, the passage of Title IX was incredibly important to laying the foundation for today's gender equity and social justice movements. To honor her tremendous contributions, Title IX was renamed the Patsy T. Mink Equal Opportunity in Education Act after Congresswoman Mink's passing in 2002. And the chairwoman Mink was also posthumously awarded the Medal of Freedom by President Barack Obama in 2014. As someone who grew up in Hawaii and really admired Patsy Mink from a very young age, I can just tell you what an indelible impact that she had on me personally, but also in paving the way for thousands and thousands of women and girls from all backgrounds to follow in her footsteps. And as Erica mentioned earlier this morning, Speaker Pelosi and members of the Congressional Asian Pacific American Caucus held a very special portrait unveiling in the US Capitol to unveil a portrait of the late Patsy Mink, and also to celebrate her contributions to progressing and ensuring that women and girls in this country have equal opportunities through the landmark passage of Title IX that she co-authored. And so that we know, what is really inspiring is to know that now, moving forward, there will be people from all over the country and all over the world who will be able to see Patsy Mink's portrait in the Capitol and to learn more about her tremendous legacy. We at the White House Initiative on Asian Americans, Native Hawaiians, and Pacific Islanders are committed to continuing that legacy and to expanding access to opportunities for women and girls in education and beyond. And we look forward to working with each and every one of you to continue building upon this tremendous legacy and advocating for gender equity in all that we do. So mahalo again for joining us today to celebrate the tremendous contributions and to honor the late Patsy Mink as we mark today's anniversary of Title IX. It is now my honor to introduce special messages from 4 incredible Asian American women who are trailblazers in their own right. Senator Mazie Hirono from Hawaii, who was the first Asian American woman elected to the US Senate. Senator Tammy Duckworth from Illinois, the first Asian American to represent the state of Illinois in Congress, as well as the first US Senator to give birth while in office. Congresswoman Judy Chu from California, who was the first Chinese American woman ever elected to Congress, as well as the chair of the Congressional Asian Pacific American Caucus, and also our fearless female athlete and Olympian, Michelle Kwan, who was the most decorated figure skater in US history. So with that, we will play their special messages for us.
Aloha, I'm Senator Mazie Hirono, and I'm glad to be with all of you to celebrate the life and legacy of an icon in American history and my dear personal friend, the late Congresswoman Patsy Mink. A champion for social justice, equality, and civil rights, Patsy Mink was a trailblazer in every sense of the word. Nearly 60 years ago, Congresswoman Mink made history as the first woman of color and Asian American woman elected to Congress. She helped our country see that women like us can and should be in the rooms where decisions are made. Patsy understood that representation matters, but she also knew that representation alone is not enough, which is why she dedicated her career to advancing policies that uplifted women, children, and other marginalized communities. This week, we celebrate the 50th anniversary of one of her most notable achievements, the enactment of Title IX, which bans sex-based discrimination in our nation's schools. Title IX opened all sorts of doors for women and girls in sports, in the classroom, and beyond. Thanks to Title IX, which was renamed for Congresswoman Mink in 2002, more women than ever are leaders in fields such as government, business, and more. They are a living testament to Congresswoman Mink's hard work. But while we have come a long way, we still have a lot more work to do in order to reach true equity, work that many of us are engaged in every day. In building on the progress Congresswoman Mink worked so hard to secure, we are helping ensure generations of all women and girls, including women of color and LGBTQ individuals, have the support they need to thrive in the classroom and beyond. I'm grateful to call many of you partners in this important work, and I look forward to our continued efforts to advance Congresswoman Mink's legacy. Mahalo for joining us today.
Hi, everyone. I'm Senator Tammy Duckworth, and I'm so glad to join the White House today to commemorate the 50th anniversary of Title IX and honor the woman who helped make this critical education reform possible, Congresswoman Patsy Mink. Congresswoman Patsy Mink's legacy and leadership is unparalleled. As the first woman of color elected to Congress, she knew all the good that comes from bringing a wide range of voices, talents, and different perspectives to the table. And that's as true as ever in our schools, too. 50 years ago, Title IX, it was a groundbreaking federal civil rights law. It prohibited sex discrimination in our education system. It helped to hold institutions and perpetrators accountable, and it paved the way for true equality in our schools. And as co-sponsor of this law, Congresswoman Patsy Mink helped to open doors and expand opportunities for women in education. As a mother of two young, beautiful girls myself, I can't imagine their opportunities in the classroom being limited simply because they are girls. For young students everywhere, I'm proud to co-sponsor a resolution to both celebrate the 50th anniversary of Title IX and recognize all that we have left to do to build on this law and expand education opportunities. All of our young students deserve an equal chance to thrive in our schools, and the same must be true for our young LGBTQ+ students as well. I'm so proud of the Biden administration for rightfully extending the Title IX protections to trans students to protect them from Republican efforts to take away their rights. While this is important progress, we must continue to do all that we can to ensure that all students feel safe, supported, and loved in our classrooms and beyond. Again, I'm so thankful to the White House for inviting me to speak to you all today. I hope you join me in commemorating the unwavering leadership of Congresswoman Patsy Mink and all that Title IX did to help build a brighter, more inclusive tomorrow for our children and future generations. Thank you, everyone.
Hello, I'm Congressmember Judy Chu, Chair of the Congressional Asian Pacific American Caucus, or what we call CAPAC. Thank you to the White House Initiative on Asian Americans, Native Hawaiians, and Pacific Islanders, and the White House Office of Public Engagement for hosting today's commemoration of the 50th anniversary of Title IX and Congresswoman Patsy Mink, and for inviting me to join you today. Earlier this morning, it was my honor to join not just Speaker Nancy Pelosi, but Congresswoman Mink's daughter, Wendy Mink, fellow KPAC members like Senator Mazie Hirono, and the incredible Billie Jean King at an official portrait unveiling ceremony honoring a pioneer and trailblazer of our community, Congresswoman Patsy Takemoto Mink. Congresswoman Mink was the first Asian American woman and the first woman of color ever elected to Congress, and paved the way for so many of us, including myself, to follow in her footsteps. Growing up, I never thought I would be in elected office, let alone a member of Congress. It's because I never saw anyone who looked like me in such positions, so it never even occurred to me that it was a possibility. And now, with the installation of this portrait, so many individuals will see it hanging in the Capitol, learn about the history of Congresswoman Mink, and see a shining example of our communities being trailblazers in Congress. So I cannot think of a better way to recognize her achievements than with this portrait in the halls of Congress. And let me take a moment to talk about Congresswoman Mink's legacy. In addition to being a pioneer for Asian American women and all women of color, she championed Title IX, which bans sex discrimination in all federally funded education and athletic activities and programs. Congresswoman Mink paved the way for greater gender and racial representation and fought hard for gender equality. Known as the mother of Title IX, Representative Mink wrote the bill in part as a response to this discrimination she faced during her own education experience. The bill was even renamed the Patsy T. Mink Equal Opportunity in Education Act upon her passing. So today, as we mark the 50th anniversary of the passage of Title IX, I look forward to honoring Congresswoman Mink's legacy by continuing our work together to uphold and strengthen this law so that every student can learn, grow, and participate in educational environments free from discrimination. It is my pleasure to kick off today's event commemorating Title IX and the woman who spearheaded it to success, a pioneer in our nation's history, Congresswoman Patsy Takemoto Mink.
Hi everybody, I'm so thrilled to be a part of this virtual event commemorating the 50th anniversary of Title IX and celebrating the legacy of Representative Patsy Mink. I never had the pleasure of knowing Representative Mink, but her work in advancing gender equity and her work to help pass the important Title IX legislation has impacted my life as well as millions of women in the country. She was a leader and also a powerful Asian American and NHPI voice. Growing up, I was lucky to follow in the footsteps of so many female giants in sports who helped pave the way. I think of athletes and legends like Billie Jean King, who also helped fight to pass Title IX and continues to fight for equal pay for female athletes. And also Representative Mink, who was a trailblazer in increasing the number of women speaking out against sexual harassment. This week, I have the deep honor to be inducted into the U.S. Olympic and Paralympic Hall of Fame. And I have, in large part, these pioneers to thank for the opportunities to have the athletic career that I had. Their tireless efforts have made a tremendous impact in our country. But I know there's still much that we need to do together.
Thank you to our fearless women leaders for those inspiring words. And Michelle, congratulations on being inducted into the U.S. Olympic and Paralympic Hall of Fame this week. I'm now happy to introduce our next speaker, Catherine Lehman, the Assistant Secretary for Civil Rights at the U.S. Department of Education. Assistant Secretary Lehman recently served as Deputy Assistant to the President and Deputy Director of the Domestic Policy Council for Racial Justice and Equity. And until January 2021, she chaired the U.S. Commission on Civil Rights, to which President Obama appointed her in 2016, and served as Legal Affairs Secretary to California Governor Gavin Newsom. And before then, Assistant Secretary Lehman was in her current position under President Barack Obama. Assistant Secretary Lehman, the floor is yours.
Thanks so much. It's such a pleasure to join you all to celebrate Congresswoman Mink, who is one of my true heroes. Her prescient, comprehensive law has transformed our lives and the nation's understanding of sex equality. 50 years in today, we work to be as forward-leaning as she was, making the promise in her law real in students' lives. Just today, in honor of the anniversary of the law, we at the Department of Education proposed new regulations to give Congresswoman Mink's law full and comprehensive effect to protect all students against sex discrimination at school. We also enforce her law every day, securing important resolutions for school students who are in school right now. Last week, we resolved a complaint from a pregnant community college student whose school had told her she should drop a course and not overtax herself during her pregnancy. Now, that school understands that it should work with pregnant students to identify appropriate supports to help them realize their academic dreams. Earlier this year, we resolved a complaint from a medical school student whose school, 4 years later, still has not even investigated for allegation of sexual assault. Congresswoman Mink's law promised us that we would live more equality in school. We still need to work to get ourselves there. We still need to work to fulfill the beautiful vision that she gave for all of us, and we at the Department of Education are fully committed to making real her promises. I look forward to continuing that work, and I'm so very grateful to be able to celebrate with all of you today.
Thank you, Assistant Secretary, and thank you for your leadership at the Department of Education. I next want to introduce Morgan Mills, who serves as Confidential Assistant to the Deputy Director at the Office of Management and Budget. Morgan was also a Title IX scholar athlete while she was a college student at Princeton University. Morgan will share her own story and also introduce and moderate our panel of esteemed speakers. Morgan?
Thank you, Rebecca, for that introduction, and thank you as well to Howard, Crystal, Grace, and Erica, and all the folks that work today to organize this incredible event. It is my absolute privilege to participate today alongside such an esteemed lineup of individuals as we commemorate the 50th anniversary of Title IX and celebrate Representative Mink's legacy. Like all the women featured here today, I owe so much to Representative Mink's trailblazing efforts. Title IX made it possible for my mom, one of 6 children and the daughter of a first-generation immigrant, to attend university on a partial athletic scholarship. And then some 20 years later, and thanks to Title IX, I was able to build upon the love of athletics that she cultivated within me at a young age and follow in her footsteps to become a Division I athlete. Title IX has truly enriched my life, directly and indirectly many times over, and I am thankful for the opportunities afforded to me and to my mother by the law. In that spirit, it is my honor to introduce our featured panelists and kick off what will undoubtedly be an incredibly rich conversation. Rosie Hidalgo currently serves on the White House Gender Policy Council as Special Assistant to the President and Senior Advisor on Gender-Based Violence, and has worked in the movement to end gender-based violence for over 25 years as a public interest attorney and as a national policy advocate. Most recently, she was the Senior Director of Public Policy for Esperanza United, a national resource center with a focus on providing training, research, and policy advocacy to prevent and respond to gender-based violence in Latino communities. Amanda Nguyen is the founder of RISE, a 2019 Nobel Peace Prize nominee and a 2022 Time Woman of the Year. Amanda's 2021 viral video ignited a wave of collective action in the anti-Asian hate movement. She drafted and unanimously passed the Sexual Assault Survivors Bill of Rights through the United States Congress, which has inspired over 50 laws that have been passed since. Amanda's directorial debut, Everything I Ever Wanted to Tell My Daughter About Men, won Best Feature at the 2022 Cannes Independent Film Festival. She was listed on Forbes 30 Under 30 twice, served at NASA and at the White House. And Mia Aizruglei is the director for the Disability Justice Initiative at American Progress. Prior to joining American Progress, Mia advocated for disability justice and inclusion at nonprofit organizations and businesses across the United States. She has worked with the Women's March, Families Belong Together, DC Action Lab, Adoptees for Justice, Fair Fight, People's Collective for Justice and Liberation, and numerous other progressive organizations. Best known for founding the Women's March Disability Caucus, Azra Lee helped organize the original Women's March on Washington in 2017. Thank you, Rosie, Amanda, and Mia for joining us today. So with that, I'll kick off the panel. My first question is for all three of you. Title IX is an incredibly rich policy achievement for gender equity, but it is also very personal to Representative Mink, whose experiences as a woman of color and frequently as the only woman in the room contributed to her career choices and her commitment to elevating the voices of those not traditionally welcome in policy spaces. Could you each please share how Title IX has affected you personally, or share any personal reflections you have about Title IX?
Well, I'm happy to jump in. So thank you so much. It's a tremendous honor to be here with you all today to celebrate the 50th anniversary of Title IX, but also to celebrate the monumental achievements and legacy of Patsy Mink. Clearly, we stand on the shoulders of a giant. And I really appreciate this question because it helped me to pause amidst all the work and do some personal reflection. And my parents came to this country as immigrants, both of them in the early 1960s. And I was in elementary school, I'm dating myself now, during the 1970s. But I think the legacy of Title IX, her leadership in really persevering to open doors for girls and women to have access to equity and education helped influence, right? The notion that women could go to college. My mother never had a chance to go to college. She came to this country at the age of 17. But you think about the fact that it's not just the laws help change the social norms. And I remember when I was in elementary school, my mother saying, you can go to college. Women, and to myself and to my sisters, really encouraging us to reach high and to know that that was a possibility in this country. And reading a little bit about Patsy Mink, I saw that even though she was a valedictorian in high school, she applied to 12 medical schools and was turned away as a woman. She happened to go to University of Chicago Law School, but then they wouldn't let her sit for the bar. Then they wouldn't hire her because she was married and had a child, right? And despite all that adversity, the way she persevered and kept working, it changed the law. And so my ability to go to law school also is a result of her tremendous legacy to keep pushing those doors open. And one thing I really admire about her, it wasn't just about her own personal advancement. As she made progress, as she ran for Congress and took on other leadership positions to change the law, she was always thinking about how to pave the way for those coming behind her. So I'm honored everyone who's spoken today, all the leadership in this administration really reflects individuals who build on that legacy of how do all of us in our work each day continue to pave that way and open the doors to greater access for everyone.
Gosh, that's kind of difficult to follow behind you, Rosie. It's really incredible. I just want to say thank you so much to everyone for putting this event together. And it's, again, such an honor to be on this panel with Rosie, with Mia, with you, Morgan. And Patsy Mink has a legacy that has touched so many of our lives, and my life in particular, in so many different ways. I think seeing is believing. And for so many of us, the dream of being able to have our voice matter, even in a room where we may be the only one that looks like us, is a tough challenge. I remember during my activism that centers around sexual violence survivors, even in progressive spaces, I was often the only Asian American woman in the room. And what gave me strength and hope in these moments to remind myself against imposter syndrome, to remind myself that my experiences do matter, was Patsy Mink. Now, Title IX has, again, influenced our lives in so many different ways, but in one way, it's been a tremendous marker in my life. Title IX creates a system for survivors of sexual violence to report acts of sexual harassment and violence in our educational system. And I am a rape survivor on a college campus. And I remember so many people, so many activists, even just rallying around Title IX. In one of the graduations, students actually put on red tape on our Black caps, Title IX. And it was an incredible moment for us of solidarity. You know, yes, like Rosie talked about, there are laws, but the social and cultural impact of it is just as important. And I remember in my graduation, just looking upon the sea of students and seeing the Title IX, those red tape that was passed around to put on our caps. It was incredibly important for the survivor community to feel like we had a chance of accessing justice. So I know your question is about, you know, Title IX, Patsy Mink, and what she means to me. What I say to that is she is a symbol for hope, not only for the survivor community, not only for gender, you know, equity, the fight against gender discrimination, but also the ability to trailblaze, to matter.
Yeah, I first want to say thank you so much for having me on this amazing panel. I'm very honored to be where I am today because I think back on sort of my journey to where I finally sort of you know, have a job, have a place where I get to talk about policy and get to make a difference on national policy. And that's that story really started with a student who was told that they weren't going to go to college. So much of my experience actually wrapped around a different law, which was the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act. And that had a huge impact on my life. And most of people were thinking about sort of my general education, not thinking sort of about how other things were impacting me, including being able to be in athletics. And I started athletics when I was in middle school. I got to go watch the Paralympics in Atlanta, and that sort of bloomed a fire in me. And I decided that I wanted to get into athletics. I wanted to go to the Paralympics. And so, you know, I got to be on my track team in high school, and really, you know, I didn't really start blossoming as a student without sort of building my confidence as an athlete. And so Title IX gave me that chance to test myself in other arenas and gain the confidence that I needed to be able to become a good student, you know, and be able to have the dream of going to college, because that was sort of something that was often told to me as a stretch goal, as something that I would likely not do, or I might go to a community college or something like that. And so, you know, I just can't explain how much being able to do athletics in school and be able to gain that skill and that knowledge and those abilities, which all transferred into going to college, going to the University of Illinois, go Illini. And I got to be on one of the only varsity track and field wheelchair teams in the country. And so it counted as a Title IX team at the university, which is very rare. And it was just such an amazing experience because I got to be a student athlete like so many people before me and gain skills as a student leader while in college, which helped build the skills that I needed to eventually go to graduate school and start doing advocacy work in my community and then nationally. So I just, the fact that there are so many amazing people have come before us and helped sort of build the roads that we use today to continue that advocacy work. And I think it spurs me to want to continue to do that type of work and to continue to build for the next generation of people who are going to come along and have the same dreams and same motivations to get out there.
Thank you so much for all of those personal reflections. My next question is for you, Rosie. So whenever there is a revolutionary policy that seeks to make advances or disrupt the status quo, it is often followed by backlash. Could you please talk a little bit about the challenges from the American public to embrace Title IX and how we are continuing to respond to those challengers?
Great, thank you so much. And thanks so much, Amanda and Mia, for sharing those really inspiring perspectives and really showing how, even though Title IX in and of itself was so important, that there's always more work to do to continue to advance these goals. And I think what's interesting, and Erica mentioned this earlier, I mean, Title IX was 37 words, and 37 words in legislation that proved to be so transformational. And yet, as you mentioned, Morgan, soon as people realized the power of those 37 words and the impact, there were attempts to roll it back. Soon thereafter, there were attempts in Congress to amend it, to narrow the scope. I don't know if people know that in 1975, when the regulations were put in place to enact Title IX and its role in athletics, the NCAA filed a lawsuit challenging the legality of Title IX. It's great to see them all now celebrating Title IX and its accomplishments, but you realize that wasn't always the case. And finally, that lawsuit was dismissed in 1978. But then later, cases were brought, and in 1984, a Supreme Court case actually rolled back the Title IX. It really limited the scope in a Supreme Court case called Grove City versus Bell. But again, to your point, like, you realize that this work is never linear. It takes constant vigilance, both to protect against rollbacks and to continue going forward. So the good thing is that Congress mobilized once again, and in 1988 passed the Civil Rights Restoration Act of 1987 that restored Title IX and its full scope. And it was vetoed by President Reagan, but Congress was able to override that veto. So again, this legacy is one that constantly has required ongoing commitment to advance Title IX. And when now President Biden was vice president, he really was very much committed to recognizing, as Amanda mentioned, that Title IX needed to do more, do better in addressing issues of sexual harassment, sexual violence, and really recognizing the ways in which that undermines access to education, to opportunities. That isn't written into the words of Title IX, but again, as it was interpreted and as people recognize what a huge component that is about making sure people have access to education free from discrimination. And so as vice president, he really supported the creation of the whole White House task force to protect students from campus sexual assault, and first and foremost, to really support and lift up survivor voices. So just tremendous, gratitude for the courage of Amanda and other survivor leaders who, through their voices and leadership, really helped advance and push forward what Title IX needed to mean in its implementation on college campuses. Catherine Lehman, who we had speaking earlier, is a champion in this regard. At the time, she was heading up the Office of Civil Rights at Ed, and this administration is so fortunate to have her again with her leadership, because that has enabled, despite the backlash, to advance this critical goal. And so, President Biden now, as president, he and Vice President Harris created for the first time this White House Gender Policy Council for that very reason, to recognize that although progress has been made, we need to go further. And for the first time ever, we have a national strategy on gender equity and equality that was created with input from all federal agencies. It was created with stakeholder input, and certainly advancing Title IX implementation and making sure that it's got a broad scope is a critical part of that. So as Catherine mentioned, today's a really significant day, both for the anniversary of Title IX, but also that Ed, the Department of Education today, put out the new NPRM, Notice of Proposed Rulemaking, because what we experienced in the last administration was again a backlash, a rollback of those critical protections. The new proposed regs put out today bring us forward. It undoes that harm, but then it takes us even further, right? Because we always have to be about going that next step further to advance equity and equality, both for protecting students from sexual harassment, sexual assault, from all forms of sex discrimination, and recognizing that also includes protections based on sexual orientation and gender identity. So again, Title IX is going to continue to advance this. And as Erica said in reading the statement from the president, I do just want to once again reiterate the last part of his statement today. He said, "My administration will continue to fight tirelessly to realize the promises of Title IX, that every person deserves an opportunity to pursue their education free from discrimination and realize their full potential." So again, it's a reminder to all of us, it's not linear, it can be hard, we must continue to persevere, and that's how progress continues to be made, but with all of us together advancing these goals. So thank you.
Thank you so much, Rosie. Amanda, I'm going to turn to you next. So Representative Patsy Mink broke down barriers and supported policies that reflected her values when she was elected to Congress. She co-authored Title IX and built up critical support to get it passed. Could you please talk a little bit more about Rep. Mink's legacy for women's rights and also for WHIAANHPI's rights?
Absolutely. And Rosie, I'm so glad that you brought up the new regulation announcement today, as well as recognizing survivor activists just from the bottom of my heart. Thank you. I want to answer your question by illustrating what I woke up to today. And this morning, it was a steady buzz on my phone of a lot of survivors reaching out to me, a lot of survivor leaders saying, "Did you see? Did you see?" And this really speaks to the ongoing legacy of Patsy Mink of Title IX. You know, that years later, yes, you know, history and progress may be not linear, but that with people who really do center survivors and also people who care about the legacy of Patsy Mink, that we can still get progress. You know, I still remember what it felt like after my rape, walking out of the hospital after my rape kit procedure was done. And this was before Me Too, you know, and I was handed a taxi voucher from the hospital. The sun was rising. I'd spent all night there to go back to the dorm room where I was raped. And I remember thinking, well, where do I go from here? And in my journey to find justice, I remember walking into my local area rape crisis center, and there weren't enough seats for us in the waiting room. And I thought to myself, oh my gosh, you know, I realized that it was difficult before, but I had no idea how pervasive you know, the obstacle courses were, even if I was at a place that I thought, like Harvard, that I thought could help me and help survivors. And I know that, you know, this is, to me, my experience is that the law has a gender and that gender isn't female. You know, it's hard for people to legislate unless you do include the voices of the affected community at the table. And the people who have the solutions to the world's most pressing problems are the people who live that problem every day. And so when I think about Patsy Mink and her legacy, I think about what it must have been like for her as, you know, the first woman of color to be elected to Congress, to have trailblazed and despite all odds, make that lasting change all the way to today. And all of those buzzes that I saw, the commotion on my phone, that feeling of solidarity that links us all together. And I think that for her, what she means to me and her legacy is that no one is powerless when we come together, and no one is invisible when we demand to be seen. And she fought for Title IX, she fought to be seen. And I feel like I can still feel that fight of hers even till today.
Thank you so much, Amanda. And lastly, Mia, as the founder of the Women's March Disability Caucus, you helped organize the original Women's March in Washington in 2017. Could you please share how your work in the women's rights organizing space intersects with your disability justice and inclusion organization efforts, and how we can encourage a more holistic, intersectional approach to gender advocacy over the next 50 years?
Yeah, most definitely. You know, I think that as I was growing up most of the time, like I said earlier, folks saw my disability. And so that was sort of the framework that we were always working from, and sort of the work that I often sort of did, but it never felt authentic. It never felt like I was being my true self in terms of the things that were affecting me in my life and were affecting my friends in their lives. And it wasn't until, I started reading the words by Dr. Kimberly Crenshaw, and her talking about intersectionality and how we don't live single issue lives. And that really hit me, that, it suddenly occurred to me why I just always felt like, even though I was working on disability issues, that I never felt like I was seen or never felt like I was heard in terms of the concerns that I had in my own life, particularly as a disabled woman of color. And so, I continued to do sort of advocacy and work in it, but it wasn't until I got to work on the Women's March that I got to really spend time looking inside myself and looking at the issues that disabled women were facing, particularly disabled women of color were facing, and the challenges that they were facing. And so, I wanted to talk a little bit about some of the startling statistics that I sort of uncovered. Women are more likely than men to have a disability. The estimate is around 36 million women in the US have some type of disability. Those rates are actually probably an undercount, particularly with long COVID. And we know that long COVID is impacting women at disproportionate rates. That women on campus who have disabilities, at least 51% in one of the studies showed that they had experienced sexual violence on campus. That I believe 90 something percent, I forgot the exact percentage, of disabled women in general have experienced some type of sexual violence within their lifetime. And that poverty is actually correlated for disabled women with not graduating from college. So there's a high correlation between disabled women in poverty rates comparatively to graduation rates. So what does all of that mean? That means that we have to start thinking more about how barriers interact with each other, particularly for women of color and disabled women of color in terms of those impacts. And, I talk about how, Title IX affected me, but also IDEA affected my life, and 504 also impacted my life, and how all of those barriers sort of interact with each other, and how sometimes policies are created without thought to the other policies that are on the table or are already sort of passed and being utilized, because they can create their own barriers for people who are multiply marginalized, and they can interact in ways that aren't understood. And so I think it's really important as we continue to think about pushing on Title IX and continuing the advocacy around it, that we don't forget that women who live in or live intersectional lives experience things differently and may need specific policies and legislation that will help reduce the barriers that they face in order to ensure that they can access the same resources and gain that American dream that we all hope to achieve.
Thank you so much, Mia, and thank you, Amanda and Rosie. And it's such a privilege to facilitate this panel today and to be in conversation with three of you who are doing such incredible, meaningful work to protect women's rights and advance equity and opportunity for women across the country. So thank you so much for being here today. And with that, I will turn it over to Rebecca.
Thank you so much for that fantastic panel, Morgan. And thank you to our panelists, Rosie, Amanda, and Mia, not just for the enlightening and inspiring conversation, but also for everything you do in your day-to-day lives. So we will close out our programming today with a special performance of the song Power by singer, songwriter, producer, and advocate, Milk.
Take the power back, baby. Fall so in love with your inner lady. No sense chasing what you could have been. Let these battles make a champion. Say hello like it's the first time that you met. You're so beautiful, I won't leave you again. Ooh, I'm finally seeing who I am. I feel the power coming back. I hold my heart in my own hands. I feel the power coming back. Ooh, power, ooh, hey, yeah. No matter your features, we're all the same, tender loving creatures, taking steps upon the earth. Don't need anyone to tell you what you're worth. Say hello like it's the first time that you met. You're so beautiful, I won't leave you again. Ooh, I'm finally seeing who I am. I feel the power coming back. I hold my heart in my own hands. I feel the power coming back. Ooh, power, ooh, power, ooh, power, ooh.
Thank you for that moving performance, Milk, and thank you for your strong voice and for your advocacy. Thank you everyone for joining us today to recognize the historic contributions of Title IX co-author Congresswoman Patsy Mink, who served as a touchstone for the promotion of greater inclusion and equity in the last 50 years. And we're also here to rededicate ourselves to continue her legacy. We look forward to working with all of you to advance greater equality for all in the next 50 years. Thank you all.